Shalom, it's an honor and pleasure to be here with Professor Stephen Windmueller, who has his background in political science, served as the dean as the LA campus of HUC, and now is emeritus professor. So thank you for taking time to talk.
Thank you, Rabbi. I'm very happy to be with you.
Our topic today of Donald Trump and America's Jews, understanding Jewish political behavior. Maybe we can start with a big question. Why has this president created such a conversation within the Jewish community?
Donald Trump, in part, is a disruptor. I mean, he even acknowledges that that is part of who he is and what he seeks to represent. And I think his presidency has evoked a good deal of response to some of the policies and positions he is asserting. And American Jews are reacting, some embracing what he has done on Israel and other issues, but many opposing his philosophies and his ideas and his policies that has thereby generated an extraordinary amount of sort of political activism in the last 2.5 years.
Mm-hmm. What do you make of this recent focus, just in the last few days, on the Democratic Party being linked to antisemitism as the current president has argued?
Indeed, there are certainly some troubling signs within the progressive wing of the party. But first of all, we keep in mind this is very small numbers of folks, that the Democratic Party has been home to a vast number of American Jews. 71% of American Jews supported Hillary Clinton. We need to remind ourselves that the party has been a very strong advocate for Israel and its history. And we need to understand that the Jewish proclivity to liberal or justice-based causes is a very important premise of much of their involvement. So as a result, this effort to sort of separate Jews from the party is not the first time that folks have tried to sort of make the case that being a Republican is in the interests of the Jewish community. My sense is that Jews will certainly be concerned about what is happening, but in the long term, at least under this administration, as long as this administration is in power, the likelihood is that Jews will continue to see common ground with many voices in the Democratic Party to pursue a course of change.
Mm-hmm. In what ways do you think Trump has himself fueled anti-Semitism, or has propped up or supported those who do?
Mm-hmm. Well, in an exit poll done after the tragedy in Pittsburgh, over 70% of American Jews who were polled indicated that they hold the president in part responsible for the rhetoric, the quality of the discourse in this country, and the kind of licensing to give space to groups that are from the alt-right and other voices on the political extreme to act out their views and actions.
Mm-hmm. How do you understand the argument that because he is so pro-Israel, he can't possibly be in any way accountable for any anti-Semitism?
Many reporters asked us in a similar vein such questions, and I remind them, and you certainly don't need to be so noted, but that American Jews have a whole array of political interests, and the vast majority of whom, while loving and caring about Israel's future and its security, also think about the questions of the economy, immigration, healthcare, Social Security, even the Supreme Court are all part of an agenda that involves the cross-section of American Jews who happen to be Democrats. And I think that has been a factor in trying to understand that Trump's loyalty and love of Israel is wonderful and should be applauded, but that his domestic and some of his other international policies are seen as challenging and problematic.
Yeah, right. So because you've worked with many rabbinical students and rabbis, how do you understand the tensions that rabbis are feeling in the field right now around, on the one hand, their moral and rabbinic responsibilities to be involved in societal affairs, on the other hand, sort of being silenced sometimes within some forces within their community? What are those tensions that are playing out, and how do you think they can be navigated?
Right. I mean, this is a really serious issue for the American rabbinate and also for Jewish communal professionals and agencies and organizations across our system. And part of it is this sense of consciousness. They're feeling that they need to be a voice of responsibility and of justice, and also knowing the tenor of their communities, meaning the diversity of viewpoints, the high degree of tension that exists amongst Jews over political and religious issues at this moment, and over Israel in particular. And as a result, it becomes a very difficult roadway or a roadmap for rabbinic leadership. I have encouraged rabbis to use ways other than necessarily the pulpit to exercise their perspectives, having conversations with people who disagree with them in front of the community as a way to at least share their ideas, but also for the congregation to learn of the perspectives of others who may disagree with them. To work behind the scenes and helping to mobilize pro-social justice causes and pro-Israel advocacy amongst progressives and other such activities. I did a session for APAC for just rabbis, and there were several hundred rabbis, and we walked through some of the strategies of creating conversations that polarized or tried to work away from the tension points to find common ground, to look at points of shared interests, and to allow rabbis to be seen as also a moderating force at a time when so many are in their respective silos or camps. But nonetheless, this is high moment of tension. Rabbis are worried that by speaking out they may actually be in trouble with their own communities. And by not speaking out, they are struggling with their own sense of their conscious sense of being a voice for being responsible to Judaism and to the Jewish community.
And also trouble with their communities. The pressure also that they need to be more vocal sometimes, right?
Yeah.
So,
that's an interesting point, because in some situations, rabbis are being criticized for not being assertive.
Right. And so it's very difficult, and I think we should all be sensitive to what it means to work in that field and the demands that come from all directions. So, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel famously said that we affirm the separation of religion and the state, but we reject the separation of religion from the human condition. And Elie Wiesel famously said that the role of Judaism was never to make the world more Jewish, but make it more human. So I wonder, how do you understand this idea that we should separate religion from government, but also that Judaism has a role, Jewish values have a role within the discourse?
No, I think that actually is one of the beauties and uniquenesses of the Jewish experience in America, that the American model allowed the Jewish community to exercise the notion that a just and caring society is the emblem of a thriving culture and democracy, and the role of Jews and Judaism is to be a reminder, to insert those values and those ideas in the context of our politics, without inserting Judaism as a faith community either dominating or playing a particular role. But clearly the conscience of the Jew is the core value of how we see ourselves and how we ought to be seen by other Americans.
Excellent. So my last my last two questions, which are big ones, looking at American political life, the trends for the coming potential decade or two. What do you see as exciting, and what do you see as troubling? And looking at just the American Jewish community and trends within the American Jewish community, what do you see as exciting? What do you see as troubling?
Some of those are actually interact with one another. I'm going to start with the troubling side, because there is also a way to make that a positive. And the principle that Americans are disaffected, not interested, not voting, not caring, is very troubling. And this is particularly a problem for the American Jewish community, because the American Jewish community prides itself in being part of this democratic experiment and votes in such huge numbers, gives monies to candidates and to causes all associated with their beliefs. But if the rest of the society sees itself as somehow detached, this is going to be highly problematic for a Jewish community, which will then be sort of singled out as being sort of, you are the government, you are the embodiment of all that is seen as establishment and problematic. So getting folks committed to the civic engagement at large is a central principle. Voter education, civics in schools, understanding that votes do count and political debates are important. That's certainly one issue, and it has, as I suggest, both its positive and potentially negative.
That reminds me of that joke that Jews always say, we're just like everyone else, only more so.
Yes.
It's like we're hypercharged in,
Yes,
you know,
right.
in our role in the society,
Right.
which is fascinating.
The second is the notion of whiteness.
Yeah.
Jews are being attacked by the alt-right as being sort of challengers and imposers, or imposing themselves onto the white agenda and establishment, and that they are perceived by the alt-right as certainly not credible whites. On the far left, we see elements that suggest that Jews are now so white, so establishment, that they no longer have a voice or credible place in the intersectionality debate and in the questions of liberation and progressive thought. This is a challenge both to the society and to the Jewish community of finding ways to understand that Jews have always been in this sort of middle ground, struggling to define and be accepted in the cultures in which they live. But this is really particularly challenging at this moment in the United States, and it could be a potential problem for the Jewish community, but the larger society as well, because if Jews are sort of taken out of the debate and are dismissed as a problem to either party or either position, I think this is highly challenging and threatening to the quality of the society. And the final premise here is that I'm concerned about young Americans and young Jews. Maybe a sense of burnout, a sense of frustration, a sense of loss of confidence, even in the institutions of Jewish life, but certainly in the institutions of democracy and government. And I worry that that could be for a period of time our major challenge to bring folks back into why it is worth being engaged, whether you're a Republican or Democrat, whether you're involved in the progressive movement or in conservative political and Jewish thought. The fact is, engagement is itself an important responsibility.
Yeah, fascinating points. Thank you so much. Please enjoy Professor Stephen Windmueller's prolific writings that you'll see weekly appear, and we'll have a few podcasts coming up later today. Thanks so much.